Hey there. This is kind of a random one-off video because I'm going to talk about something that is super important that I've talked about in a couple of different places, but is so important for the next couple of weeks that I wanted to specifically call it out in this video and talk through it kind of separate from the rest of the material, and that is your browser's developer tools. And this is a feature that comes with every browser, and it's going to be like your best friend when you are developing JavaScript. So pretty much for the rest of the course. Um, so I'm just going to jump right in. You can go to this page and read through it if you'd prefer. But long story short, if you remember back in the P5 days when you were editing in P5, if you made a mistake, if you made like a syntax error or something, if you said like circle and then you had like, I don't know, just an open parenthesis, which is wrong, you'd immediately get this feedback where it's like red and you get error messages. And if you hit run, then you get this error message down at the bottom with some extra information. And that was kind of like a natural part of the flow. When you got an error message, you would fix it and you would move on with your life. And okay, so that's P5. But now we are in sort of vanilla JavaScript, which is JavaScript without any of these extra P5 magical features, which means that you don't have the fancy like P5 editor here helping you in this way. So you need to look for your error messages explicitly, and that's where your developer tools come into play. So your developer tools come with your browser. How you get to them kind of depends. I've laid out a couple of the more obvious ones here. I'm in Chrome here, so I can go to this three-dot menu and I can go to more tools and I can open up my developer tools this way. That opens up a new tab where it has a couple features that I'll talk about in a second. Depending on your browser, it might be a little different. So I know a few folks are using Safari. So if I just type in like Safari open developer tools into a search engine, there will be, you know, steps on the internet for you to follow. So here it is. You have to go to Safari, Settings, Advanced, then Show Develop menu in menu bar. And okay, so that's how you get to it in Safari. So no matter how you get to it, this is where error messages will end up. And now the reason it's kind of hidden like that is if you think about just your normal, you're browsing the internet, you're not thinking about web development or writing code at all. You're just, going to whatever websites you're going to. You don't really want to see all of the error messages that are popping up behind the scenes just because you probably don't care about them. If there's some image or something that doesn't load on this website, like, do you really care? Do you really need to know that? Probably not. So your browser hides them from you. But if you open up your developer tools, so I'm going to go back to my three-dot menu and then go to more tools and then developer tools, you'll see that there are error messages happening behind the scenes. And, I'm not going to pick on the developers of this website because there are bugs everywhere on the internet. I kind of suggest just kind of playing around by going to a few of the websites that you visit every day and opening up your developer tools and seeing what kind of errors you see. Okay, so I've talked about opening up your developer tools. Next, let's kind of talk about like the kinds of things that you have in here that you have at your disposal. So the one that I'm going to talk about the most in this video is the console tab. But just real quick, you do have some other tabs to play with in your tools menu here. So Elements gives you a picture of like the HTML that your browser is understanding. This can be really helpful if you're like coding and you need to know like exactly what element is that, or like you want to look at the CSS for a particular element, so I can see like the CSS that's being used in this web page or in any web page, including ones that I'm developing. So I don't know, if I look at like here, I can see, here's the styling that makes that particular element look the way that it does. Another way you can usually get to this tool is if you right click and then click inspect, it'll jump to that particular element. So that's sort of the elements tab. Some other tabs, your sources tab gives you like all of the files that were downloaded. Your network tab gives you a list of all of the network requests that were sent as part of that page. So you can see here on the Millersville website, it's not just a single file, it's actually all of these requests. So this is another interesting way to see what websites are doing sort of behind the scenes and to get a better idea of what your code is doing. But the one I want to draw your attention to the most is the console tab, the JavaScript console tab. And you can kind of think of this like JavaScript console tab in your developer tools as similar to when you were in P5, this little gray box in the lower left. So this is where, for example, if I had a syntax error, it would show up here. And this is very similar to the JavaScript console over in your developer tools. So you can think about it as basically the same thing, but you need to specifically open up your developer tools to see it. Okay, so why am I even talking about this at all? Like, you can use your developer tools to understand other people's web pages and to see the kinds of error messages that you're getting behind the scenes, and that can be interesting. And like inspect element and see how other web pages have figured out their styling. But that's not why I'm talking about it. The reason I'm talking about it is that this is super important when you're coding. So if I open up a new like Replit project, oh boy, is my internet down? That's lovely. Okay, good, whatever. Let me just create a new project real quick. And let's say that I have a button that I want to click and then show something. Button on click equals clicked, whatever. And I'll say click me, and I'll say button. Okay. And then I'm going to go over to script.js. I'm going to define that clicked function, and I'm going to say alert hello. Okay. I'm going to run this, and I'm going to see what happens. If I click this, what happens? And nothing happened. Why? And at this point, you might be feeling, kind of frustrated if you've written your code and it's not working. It's not doing what you expected it to do. I expected this to show an alert message, and it's not. Why is that? So now this is where the developer tools come into play. So I can open up my developer tools to see the error messages that I wasn't seeing before. So if I go to more tools and developer tools, that opens up another sort of tab, and you can ignore a lot of these error messages. This is like why it's hidden by default. Like a lot of these are just like, these are for Replit itself. Like I guess it's trying to do things that my computer doesn't have access to, I guess. I'm not really sure, but it doesn't really matter. I don't really care if Replit itself has some error messages. What I care about is error messages in my code. So in script.js, for example. So here I see the error message that is causing my code to break. So if I click this, so actually let me click this little button here, which clears out all of the messages. And let me click here. And now I see that when I click here, I get the error message, hello is not defined, on line 2 of my script.js file. So if I go to line 2 in script.js, I can see alert hello, and I can kind of squint at this and compare it to the syntax that I was trying to use in like a tutorial or in a like documentation page or whatever. And here in this case, I just forgot my quotation marks. And if I rerun this and now click me, now it does work. So looking in your developer tools is going to be super, super, super important. In fact, like I recommend just keeping them open. That way, when you get an error message, you see it right away rather than needing to remember to open it. Okay, the next thing I want to do is, and I hope this doesn't make anyone feel like I'm picking on them, but in the last week, a few folks, well, a lot of folks have not submitted a project yet, and I'm guessing that it's because you were getting error messages and you didn't know where to look. So now you know where to look. But a few folks did submit projects, and I appreciate that. And some of them had some error messages in the JavaScript console. And again, I hope that no one feels like I'm picking on them, but I did want to use these projects as an example of like fixing like the real errors that folks are getting. So I'm going to run through like 3 of them kind of quickly. So I'm gonna maybe close this tab now, sure. So I'm gonna jump over to this. This is last week's project, and if I run this and I say, give me an adjective, green, give me a color, whoops, colors are adjectives, I guess. It doesn't really matter. I'm just gonna put test data in here now, and I click OK, and nothing happens. What the heck? So here, you can do a few things. One, you can kind of read through the code line by line and get a better idea of like exactly what's happening. But honestly, the first thing I recommend doing is opening up your browser tools. So if I go to more tools, developer tools, now I've opened it up, and now I see that there's an error message. I can ignore most of this stuff and I can clear it out and maybe try again, click OK, so that I can focus on just the one error message. And I see this uncalled type error document.get element by ID is not a function on line 2 of script.js. Okay, so if I jump over to line 2, and like this does get a little annoying because I'm just juggling so many tabs, but usually I like pull stuff up on multiple monitors. Anyway, so I'm looking at line 2 of script.js, line 2 of script.js, which is this whole thing, and I'm going to kind of read carefully. Adjective input element equals document.get element by ID, and in here, there's just kind of there's a typo, and typos are a big part of coding, and this is why we look in our JavaScript console, just to catch things like that, element by ID. So if I type that so that it's, without a typo in it, and I rerun it, and now I'm going to say, give me an adjective, slow, and color is green, and if I click OK, then now it's working. But the important thing is that I looked in my JavaScript console to see the error, which gave me the hint of where I needed to look, which then let me figure out how I fixed it. So let me jump over to another example. So I have another submission of last week's project. So I'm going to type in some test data, 1, 2, 3, and I'm going to click OK, and nothing happened. And again, this is very, very common when you write some code and then you click a button or you do something and your code doesn't do what you expected it to. That's totally, totally normal. This is coding. But what it means is I need to do a couple things. One, I could read through the code line by line, but before I even bother with that, I'm going to jump over to the developer tools, and maybe I'll clear this out and click OK again. And now I see that I have a reference error, submit is not defined, and this time it's in my index file, looks like. So it doesn't really give me a line number, and that's okay, but I can see that I use the submit function here in the buttons on click. So okay, that tells me that I probably need a submit function over in script.js. I'm loading script.js here. Script.js, I have a submit function, okay? So the next thing I will think about is like, okay, so I have a submit function over in my script.js file, and I'm calling that submit function from my index.html file. So what gives? So let me scroll up and kind of stare at this line here. Again, this is kind of like you have to kind of stare at stuff and compare what you have to like examples and whatnot. I happen to kind of recognize that this line just needs an I in here, so it needs to be script, not SCRPT. So if I change that to script, then I'm guessing this will work now. So if I click this and I go 1, 2, 3, and I am going to clear this out ahead of time and click OK. And okay, now I see that I'm getting another error message, and this is again very common, where you'll fix one error message and get a new one, and you'll have to fix that one next. So now I see that it is loading my script.js file correctly, and now I'm in my JavaScript code over here. So I need to look at line 6 of my script.js file, and it says cannot set properties of null, setting inner text on line 6. So if I go here, that tells me that object output element is null, which is just a fancy word for like nothing. So object output element is a variable that points to nothing, but I see that I'm setting it here. So document.get element by ID, that syntax looks correct. Object output, so I'm looking for an ID with an element with an ID of object output. So let me go to index.html, and I see object input here. I need object output, that's here, output. So it looks like this is just another typo. So I think this is just missing a T, output. And I'm guessing that maybe something similar here, but let me run this and see what happens. 1, 2, 3. Okay, let me clear this out first. Okay. And okay, cool, no big deal. Same kind of error, but now on line 12, and I think it's probably something similar. So if I go down here to line 12, color output with a T here, and then I jump over to my index, so I see the ID is color output. So color output, let me run that. And 1, 2, 3, okay. And okay, now I'm getting one other error message down here. My face might be covering that. Actually, it's really annoying. Let me clear this out. Let's click OK. So here's my error message. Movie input element is not defined on script.js line 15. So we're getting sort of further down into the code, and that's good. So I see movie input element. Actually, here's the typo. Element, I think. So let me run this again. Let me clear this out. 1, 2, 3. Okay. Okay. Movie output is not defined. I'm guessing it's something similar, just a typo or something. Movie output. So movie output is not defined, and that's because we called it movie output element here. So I could go either way, but let me maybe change it to, I'll change this to element, and I'll change this to movie output element as well, just so that they are kind of the same thing. So let me run that, see what happens. 1, 2, 3. Let me clear this and click OK, and OK. Script is not line 18 now. Okay, so I'm still not quite right. So now it's here, one line down, and we're on the last line, so that's good. So movie output element is null, which I think is probably going to be the same kind of error message that we saw before. So if I go over here, movie output, okay, so this one needs to be capitalized, and I think that's probably it. Let's see. 1, 2, 3. Okay. And 1, 2, 3. Okay. There we go. Now I have no more error messages. I'm not looking too close at like whether the text actually makes sense because I just put in test data, but the error messages are gone. So the takeaway of this video is go look in your JavaScript console. Open up your developer tools and look in your JavaScript console. That is where your error messages are. In fact, I suggest just keeping your developer tools open the entire time that you are coding, just because it's so important to see the errors as they happen. Okay, so hopefully that helps unblock you if you were stuck getting coding stuff and then it wasn't working and you weren't sure why. This is probably why. It's probably because you have error messages in your JavaScript console and you just need to look at them to understand what you need to fix. Okay, so let me know as you have questions. Hopefully this helped, and I'll see you in the various other videos and chat rooms and whatnot. All right, see y'all.